Hi everyone, I'm Ren. I usually write reviews, but this time is on a special occasion and perhaps in this way, in video format, it will be simpler and more direct. This time I want to talk about one of my favorite video games. It's a topic that has kilos and kilos of substance, which could give many written articles, and about which there has been a lot of talk. But what to do? I'm going to especially talk about the original game and a few mods. This is a video game that fascinates me. It will be the aesthetics, the huge number of weapons, the memes, the slight role-playing touch that it has. Such is the power of the game that once you have visited the zone, you will end up returning to it. This time I will talk about S.T.A.L.K.E.R, Shadow of Chernobyl. Announced in 2000 and based partly on Stugarsky's book and partly in Tarkovsky's tedious film, S.T.A.L.K.E.R promised to be something great. 30 square kilometers maps to explore, full of action and populated by mutants, other stalkers, military and deadly traps, the so-called anomalies. It promised an artificial life system, a life, whereby mutants and stalkers would randomly attack each other and follow their own vital patterns, performing missions, eating, sleeping, and roaming freely around the area, without the player having to get involved. A combat AI based on the goal-oriented action planning principle, whereby the enemy's combat tactics adapted to your gameplay style. All this with visuals that at the time would burn your video card twice, with parallax, weather and day and night cycle, dynamic lights and wet surfaces when it rained. And in the end, after 7 years, it came out and...
Get out of here, Stalker.
Well, it was what they promised and at the same time not. The game, it was a good game, no doubt, but it gave a feeling of rushed history essay that had to be turned over the next day. 3.6 Rodgens, not great, not terrible. What happened? Why did it turn out like this? Let's review it first to explain why. The plot revolves about a bold Ukrainian clone of Vincent Stone that falls from a convoy full of corpses. He is picked up by an arms dealer in his bunker, and when he wakes up, he does not remember anything of his past. All he knows is that he has to eliminate a certain stalker by the name of S.T.A.L.K.E.R, known as a legend in the exclusion zone for being one of the few who got to the center of it. The whole journey takes the protagonist, Mark I, through the abandoned wastelands of the Chernobyl exclusion zone. Warehouses, secret bunkers, and laboratories. A tour around the Soviet Ukraine, frozen in time, full of dilapidated factories overrun by vegetation, cars retired in the roadside, rust everywhere, and abandoned village. But it's not a cakewalk. The zone is a special place, where the laws of nature has been altered, and not only by radiation, which is the least of the problems, but by anomalies. Deadly traps generated after a fictional second accident that happened 20 years after the explosion of the power plant in the 86. ranging from electric shocks to puddles of acid, and zero-gravity zones or space-time loops. But the anomalies leave behind artifacts, biological remains, and debris transformed by these, with almost miraculous properties. Some cut bleeding, heal wounds, and others will even allow you to withstand 5,000 volts to the nipples. Because these special qualities of the artifacts, the stalkers came to be. Mercenaries, tourists, assassins, ex-convicts, or researchers who have gone to the zone to unravel its mysteries or to get rich with the artifacts, as long as they are not caught by the military, who ain't taking shit from anybody or something worse. Yes, because if the existence of the anomalies and everybody clapping each other around for artifacts and information weren't enough, the fauna of the area is also there to ruin your life. Mutant rats, dogs, wild boars, even humanoid mutants with psychic powers, or with biological optic camouflage. Byproducts not only from radiation, but also from psi emissions that will fry the brain of those who are caught on the surface when they hit, and the blowout brothers of the psi emissions, and that in the retail version only happened twice. What a wasteland, boy. Now that we have the full picture, let's move on to the gameplay. In the end, it came out as an ARPG, quote marks RPG. There are quests, there are stats, period. With dashes of survival. You have a hunger meter, and if it depletes, you lose HP and stamina runs out faster. You have an inventory limited by weight, and items break down. The bulk quests that in theory change according to what happened with the ally were watered down to kill this guy, get this artifact, or this piece of mutant. And there are times that you fulfill them without even having accepted them before, in which case you may get a collect your reward message after killing a random guy. And not to mention the economy that is extremely broken, being able to bath in rubles shortly after starting the game. Navigation is entirely on foot. Neither the vehicles that appear in the promotional material nor fast travel are available, and with some backtracking included in the game, it can be a bit of a pain in the ass. And sprint and jump is fine until you have a rifle, pistol, 2 medkits, 5 bottles of vodka, and you have loot half of grain. In which case you will have the endurance of a post-COVID patient, and if the endurance runs out, you get stuck like a steak and get fucked. About the gameplay, you have an impressive arsenal ranging from Makarovs, sniper rifles, shotguns, and even a railgun. There are special variants and you can modify some weapons, albeit limited by adding a scope, a grenade launcher, or a suppressor. But beware of the condition they are, because the worse, the more chances of them jamming you have, leaving you unprotected. Besides that, you have to take into account the type of ammunition, enemy's armor, and above all, rely on the ballistic system with its parable, ricochet, and normally the first bullet from the magazine is special and for some reason more lethal. For all this, a well-placed shot between the eyes with an MP5 is almost more effective than 10 lead-made holes to the thorax with a Gurza with AP subsonic ammo. Killing an enemy is playing a game of Ukrainian roulette. The same thing happens with protection suits and damage received. A simply misplaced shot can cancel your subscription to life, or if the suit is in poor condition, an anomaly that you could survive under normal conditions will put you on the newspapers. And if you want to keep your equipment in good condition, better say goodbye to it because there is no way to repair it. The artifacts, which were supposed to be rare and elusive but pop up like shrooms, give different types of buffs and nerfs. But these stats in many cases do not have the correct values or were implemented without any type of balancing or testing. anomalies are not so lethal, depending on their mood, because even with protective gear and artifacts, they are anomalies of padron. Some do lots of damage, some other none. The anomaly detection is reduced to throwing balls to the less visible ones, and a single multi-purpose detector, which works now as a Geiger counter, now as an ear-piercing beeping hellspawn. The stealth. The rate unknown that is never introduced, but there it is, with a noise and luminosity meter on your HUD, often ignored. And truth be told, working like that, it has no business to be there, because half of the time it's useless and suppressors seem to be decorative. After seeing this once, understand that in Metro 2033, since 4A Games was founded by ex-GSC employees, stealth was like that. And GA life. As for the cycles, it's true that the stalkers and mutants fulfill them. They eat, gather at bonfires, play songs, go hunting, fight each other. In fact, it's not uncommon to see mutants drag the corpse of a stalker or another mutant, for instance. But the degree of freedom of movement they spoke of is rarely seen. No invasion of mutants in safe areas, no active warfare of factions beyond those at the moment on the map. That does not mean that you cannot shoot someone from a neutral faction and make them hate you. Actions have consequences, and putting allies 6 feet underground will instantly turn you into a public enemy and making your gameplay a fucking hell. As for the combat AI, the behavior of the enemies goes from 0 to 10, getting stuck just to coordinate like Spetsnaz squad on steroids seconds later. When the AI works, it works very well. Against ranged combat, they will look for cover to hide and will try to get out of cover crouching. If you charge against them, they go back and seek to reload from cover. And the mutants will flee to safety if they see that you're going to remove them from existence. If you eliminate more than a percentage of a pack of dogs, the rest of its members will turn around and put miles between, for instance. However, some erratic behavior of the AI can sabotage your game, such as some character falling into an anomaly or a bunch of mutants do poor pathing. Although that may work to your advantage at other times to get rid of enemies without pulling the trigger. By the way, there are cases of enemies spawning behind your back, and every time you load a save, the AI also reloads as if they were actors recording a scene, which again can work to your advantage if you have to talk to an NPC that got stuck on alert mode. To top all this, the game presented a boatload of bugs that either send you to the desktop or could make you unable to advance and force you to load a much earlier save game, like the one that left you with background radiation throughout all the game, or the one that made you walk like Chiquito la Calzada, stumbling around. And many of those bugs continue existing, despite the patches, although perhaps the fact that there is a Russian version and a version for the rest of the world with different patches has something to do. For all the aforementioned reasons, it's a hard game, cause it's clear that even though you are well stocked, you can kick the bucket in a matter of seconds and bless the quick save and load keys because you are going to wear them out as well as the preemptive manual saves. Despite all this being this flawed, S.T.A.L.K.E.R somehow makes up for it. It's a unique game, it's special, it has something extra. It's the setting, the feeling that everything is alive despite the limitations of the life, the feeling of loneliness, of mystery, the exploration, walking around where 50,000 souls lived 30 years ago, whose vestiges are scattered through the streets, stop in time. The feeling of tension and terror when you enter an underground tunnel and it's not until you hear noises that you really realize that you are screwed, because it's full of invisible bloodsuckers. An immersive experience fueled by the detail the maps are made with, the graphic quality and the sound of conversation and guitar songs around bonfires, while listening to distant gunshots, screams and grunts, or the sound of radios together with a gloomy soundtrack full of drone tracks. It's a game made to tell stories about your playthrough, as if it was your own adventure, both for the good and the bad. Because all of these, the things that make S.T.A.L.K.E.R what it is, a crowd has gathered around creating a subculture in which there are LARPers, cosplayers. Even all that has caused an increase of tourist visits to the Chernobyl exclusion zone, both legally and illegally, being the latter choice the one of those who call themselves S.T.A.L.K.E.Rs in real life. Although that's something that not everyone likes. Because beside the moral implication, some assholes fuck everything up. Horribly. But going back to the retail game, gameplay changes are part of the game's development cycle, sure, but... Where the fuck is the artifact transmutation and weaponization? Where is the repair function? Where are the big guns? Where are the anomaly detectors and the factions warfare? Where are the real-time news? Where the fuck are the vehicles?
Bueno, pero ¿esto qué es? ¿Pero esto qué es?
So part of those things are in there, in the expansion. Some other, like the maps or gameplay features, are in the multiplayer, and some others are missing in action. There are some very dodgy signs of splicing and cutting everywhere, transitions between maps that do not fit, and that after looking at the map on the PDA show that something is happening there, that some paths should lead to regions that are still well detailed on the PDA map, instead but are inaccessible. Even on the maps themselves you see things that should definitely lead somewhere else but are disabled or roughly covered. All those loose ends, traces and tons of bugs after 7 years of development. It's easily said. If Duke Nukem Forever is the king with 14 years of development, although more polished, S.T.A.L.K.E.R is the prince, although Cyberpunk has stolen the title in all categories. But how could this happen, that it was played with bugs and poorly pruned after 7 years? Well, it happened because of the following. The game was announced in 2001, TBR 2003, yep, the year of Serious Sam, Rod Faction and the first Halo. It started as a kind of Unreal with good environments and robots. But around 2002 they changed the focus and moved the action to Chernobyl. That's when the title of Oblivion Lost was changed to S.T.A.L.K.E.R Oblivion Lost, just to change it again some months later into Shadow of Chernobyl. Just looking for the right approach, adding things, removing things led to the project to development hell and was constantly delayed. And that displeased those who had to publish the game, that is, to THQ. And by the end of 2004, THQ, fed up because of the delays and the game-winning vaporware prices left and right, sent the Scissors Commando to Kiev so that the GSC could stop running circles, and the development and splicing process was sped up for 3 years until the game came out in 2007. The rest is history. The issue is that many of the things that did not appear in the retail version were still there. Years later, after going full 49er with the data, it has been seen that a large percentage of everything that was promised is there in the code and in the files, as bits, traces and disconnected things, code, scripts and even textures and models. Yeah, it's something common that happens with games, it's not new, but in this case it was way too evident. It wasn't until 2009 that GSC decided to release a 2004 build, probably just what they had before the snip. Unstable build, but unstable in everything that's from S.T.A.L.K.E.R is an absurd term, since even in the retail version itself, it's as unstable as Reactor 4 of the Chernobyl power plant. Where was everything what they had promised? The maps were bigger, there were more weapons, more features, vehicles, the ALF act as promised. With this knowledge, and with enough evidence spread around the internet in form of partial builds, mine content, and the aforementioned final game and production documents leaked over the years, all show that what we had in the end was a botch due in part to the decision of the devs and in large part to the purge by THQ. And it's crystal clear that history, being the S.T.A.L.K.E.R community as it is, will repeat itself when the second one comes out. Why? Well, because S.T.A.L.K.E.R 2 was announced years ago. I'm not talking about 2 years ago, but in 2010. The original idea for S.T.A.L.K.E.R 2 was announced almost at the same time as the last expansion of the original game, but development stopped in 2012 and GSC closed. Although they are back in business now and resumed the development. But all that leaves a trail of crumbs and material, it always leaves it. And indeed today we have documents and concept art of what was going to be S.T.A.L.K.E.R 2. And with that at hand, bets are that once S.T.A.L.K.E.R 2 comes out, the one announced in 2019, some group won't be convinced with the final result, will take what was left in the inkwell from the 2010 version and try to restore it to the new one. But we'll see about that when it's released. For now, let's focus on the mods. We have reviewed the original game, what came to us and what happened for it to get to us like that. I have already said that there are many points that fascinate me about the game, but if there is something that fascinates me even more, and that happens to me with almost all games, is what's behind it. What was left on the road, what was seen and did not arrive, all the builds prior to the final one, concept arts. Many elements were recovered in one way or another in the expansion, but that was not it. We wanted to experience the original with everything that was cut from it. But if S.T.A.L.K.E.R is characterized by something, and the reason why it's so attractive, it's because of its modding community, and within it are those that interest me for the matter I'm talking about. The people whose purpose is to give it back to S.T.A.L.K.E.R what was taken from it. Give it back all the juice. Taking into account that there were tons of material there easily restorable with 3 or 4 splices and recompilations of code, mods could be made to restore much of that content. The first attempt was Oblivion Lost, which more or less returned some of the things from the plot, features and patch loose stuff. But it was quite meh, and more stuff was missing. It was thanks to the old builds and development documents leaked over the years that they were able to get down to business. However, as always, there are different angles to do it. Some think that you have to tear most of the stuff added after the cut and leave it as faithful to the S.T.A.L.K.E.R Oblivion Lost era. Others think that with the retail features plus a few extra brushstrokes of cut features and establishing the progression of the plot and maps as it should is enough. And finally, there are those who think that S.T.A.L.K.E.R was all of the above and have to do it in a big way. A big bulk of stuff, soon from as much of the available material possible, and open it either with original concepts or unused concepts, even from the expansion. And that's we have Oblivion Lost Remake, Vector of Alienation, RMA, and Lost Alpha. I won't go into much detail, but to assess them and cut short explanation in future videos, I have to talk about a couple of things. The first thing is there are 3 cut main maps: Dead City, The Swamp, and Generator, and a minor one, Darkscape. In these maps, part of the key points of the plot happened, being the Dead City and Swamps where some important revelations for the plot occurred, and the Generators and their underground laboratory where the endgame would take place. On the other hand, Darkscape was a transition zone with little to explore, but there was a run from one map to the game's starting zone in the first hours of gameplay, to force you to become acquainted with the vehicles. And the following are some key points of the plot itself. In the original game, after deactivating the Lost Laboratory, you will receive a message on the PDA urging to go to the secret hideout in Agroprom to meet Doc. There you get a surprise in a form of an explosive device that the old man had planted just cause. After this, still suffering from tinnitus and double vision caused by the explosion, it was time for Doc to explain who you really were and what your true mission was. One flashback and you're ready. And the endgame, the real one that does not involve touching the monolith, was unlocked by finding a couple of items in Pripyat, and the last confrontation was managed in a very quick and sloppy way, with a chase through portals around the Chernobyl nuclear power plant, very much in the same fashion that the last section of Half-Life, and with a final video that sequence that did not match what just had happened or fit at all. Fits bland, like they went all, shit, we haven't woven all this properly after the cutting, bring up the glue. According to the original plotline, the one from the builds and the documents, the one who fills in the gaps in your memory is to a large extent Doc, and sometimes a collaborator of the main character. But it did not happen in Agroprom. It varies between builds and documents. On the other hand, to unlock the true ending, you were forced to move heaven and earth looking for some documents in which there were clues of where the other dogs were. And the ending already took place in a more suitable location that effectively matched with the video that came out in the retail game. That is, the laboratory and the generators. All more cohesive and leaving more space and time for the development of the plot. In fact, From the endings initially planned, none correspond to the one that was bad in the original game, and they are much darker, with consequences of your action being bad, worse, and worse. With all this said, we can properly talk about the mods, but you have already spent a lot of minutes and I don't want to extend it any longer, this must be getting boring for sure, so let's leave it for another video. In the next one, Oblivion Lost Remake and Vector of Alienation, the Time Machine.
¡Putos anuncios, joder!